All right, so we're going to get into something we've been kind of holding off on a while.
Not really poker related, but I feel like it's the fruits of our labor.
Yes, gaming.
Yes,
gaming related are kind of our ability to work together and strategies in gaming. So, if you don't know, we were on the CBS game show called Lingo, and we're going to talk about how we got on that game show, and then later we're going to talk about how we won that game show. But let's bring it back. Let's just talk about real quick what Lingo is. You want to explain what Lingo is?
All right. So Lingo is actually an older game show that was the host was Chuck Woolery. He was probably from the 80s. That was on the Game Show Network and a bunch of different networks or whatever the case may be. Very similar to Wordle. The only difference is with Wordle, you don't get any letters, where in Lingo, you actually get the first letter to the word. And there's all different variations on how to play it, but the crux of it is similar to, the more popular game Wordle, where you enter guesses into the system, and correct guesses are highlighted by a certain colored, basically like a ball, if you will, like a certain colored cube, and then close guesses, which means the letters in the word, but it's not in the right slot, are illuminated by a yellow like square or cube, essentially. And then that's how you help solve the word. With Lingo, it's a little bit different than Wordle, only because with Wordle, I already explained it, you're not given any letters, and there is no keyboard in front of you in Lingo. So you kind of got to know what you're doing and words really that are a part of a 5 or 6 letter combo or whatever the case may be. But we can talk a little bit about the rules and stuff like that. But essentially, it's like a variation of Wordle.
So the show is hosted by RuPaul. The first season is done temporarily, and they have signed on for season 2. Now, applications are open for season 2, just so you know. I saw things online. People can apply. Now, how we got on it, without getting in like too specific, but like general knowledge, because people were asking, like, how do you get on a game show? How does that happen? Basically, Brian applied for us to be on a game show a long time ago. You want to talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is going back probably like
5 years ago.
5 or 6 years. There was an open casting call for a show called Can You Beat Shazam, right? And the host at the time was Jamie Foxx. And if there's one thing that I don't want to say like I know a lot about, I don't want to say I know a lot about music, but like I kind of
like pop music and
like music, old music,
yeah.
like all different genres, like from country to sock hop. I know a lot of different songs. Anyway, so I reached out to Anthony and was like, dude, I feel like I would do really well on this show. We should apply, yada, yada, yada. It'll be really fun. And we wound up applying, and all we got was like the generic, like, thank you for applying. We'll be in touch, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So fast forward to like this time last year, I just received an email from, I would assume it's someone from that is a casting director or affiliated with that type of thing. So basically, like the same producers that produced Lingo produced this show. They're like, hey, we found this. And they were looking for people that were in the profession that Anthony and I were in.
They were friends, and like they were looking for like mother, daughter, husband, wife, like people that were connected somehow as a team, not just 2 random strangers.
And to be 100% honest, at first, I thought I was getting scam.
Yeah, we were like, is this a scam or is this real? So just so you know, always do your due diligence. So we asked a lot of questions. We researched, like we looked up the name, I think on LinkedIn or something. We're like, all right, where do they work for? Like, who is this? And we saw them like connected to the media company.
Yes.
We're like, okay, I think they're legit.
Yeah.
So we did our due diligence of studying by looking up who was who, because we were talking, that was the whole conversation. Like, is this a scam? You think is real? I don't know. But they basically sent out an email and they were just like, hey, we're looking for people. We have a new game show. We need people. Basically, would you be interested?
So long story short, we did our due diligence. We vetted the people that were like pretty much contacting us, and we submitted an application, and we were able to start the interview process at the very basic stages before we were even considered like to be contestants. Without going into too much information with that, we had multiple interviews via Zoom, only because, and we'll kind of talk about this, the show had been rebooted from the 80s version in the United Kingdom, and it did really, really well over there.
Yeah, it was like the #1 game show in the last 10 or 20 years for the UK.
Yes. So the idea was to reboot it here in the States and then have United not United States contestants, Americans contestants be on the show. But that was one of the caveats to it, is that in order to go through the process, you had to agree to travel essentially to the United Kingdom for filming and things like that.
So a couple tips, because I'm going to drop along the line here as we're talking about, like, because people are going to want to know how we got on a game show. Obviously, one, you got to know where the destination is. So I would say that is a big step, because there's a bunch of people that probably want to be on a game show, but then they find out they have to travel, they have to take off days from work, they have to make sure that it's in their schedule. Like, we had to take days off from work to go there. So you need to make sure that you are actually available and you know where they're recording from or where they're going to be. I mean, you don't need the exact address, but you need to know, like, are they going to be filming in LA? For us, it was Manchester United Kingdom. So we had to make sure that, we were going to be able to go over there. So that's a big hurdle for getting on the show, is make sure that you're actually going to be available to be at the location of where it's going to be.
Yeah. Yep. So a lot of the things that went on behind the scenes was like interviews, basically kind of showing like our connection. And if you have been following our podcast for the maybe 2 years that we've kind of been here, you can see Anthony and I have been close friends since, we were small. We know each other well. We know our intricacies and things like that. We know our strengths, our weaknesses, and not to mention, we study poker together, so we know our habits when it's time to kind of lock in. And honestly, when we were given this opportunity, like, there was no doubt in our minds that if we were selected, we had a really, really good shot to do well, because again, we know what it takes to kind of like lock in, study, and like I guess you could say like hone our craft. And I'm a nerd. Like, obviously I'm on Nerd Enthusiast Poker Podcast, but I do all kinds of word searches, crosswords, like Sudoku. Like, that is what I do outside of poker as like my hobby. Like, I get my enjoyment out of doing like puzzles and things like that. So like, this game, Wordle, all that was like literally right in my wheelhouse. Like, it was like,
yeah,
I can do well at this if I'm given an opportunity.
And I was playing just Wordle at the point when he contacted me about this, but then I just upped my game, and I'll talk a little bit about that, how we went into a little more deeper strategy. I'm going to say pro tip number 2 for trying to get on a game show, which I originally got, and I don't want to get too much in detail what they told us, but they basically look for people that are outgoing. Okay, they want people that are smart, but also outgoing. Because if you're super smart, but you have no personality and you're like a wall, that's not going to fly for a 9 o'clock prime time show. They want people that have personalities, outgoing. And I actually learned this I got to give a shout to my buddy, Dan Licata, who I used to work with, who one day, without getting too far in detail, he like basically dropped on me, and I thought he was joking that he went on The Price is Right. And I was like, and he won. He won like a whole prize package. And I was like, how to get on there? And he's like, dude, my buddy told me this. He's like, when you go to interview with the producers, he's like, you got to be energetic. Mm-hmm. Like, you got to be like hype. Don't be like an ass. Don't be like crazy, but like be like, oh yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Like, you got to be animated. You got to be and over top. So like, I told Brian this too. I said, okay, and the producers kind of reinforced that too.
But the thing is like, for us, it's not something that was an act.
That's what I mean. Like, we're naturally
like
talking,
that's naturally who we are. Yes, absolutely. Like, we had that interaction. Like, again, we're very competitive with each other. Like, he has a tally of how many times he's beat me heads up.
I think
throughout
it's
the
undefeated.
Like it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't even know when this happened, other than the time I like laid down aces to you at Harris at one time, where I was like, dude, really? Like, I'll hold that over your head a million times. But anyway, but the point is that we have a lot of, I don't want to say charisma, because that sounds like really douchey and like arrogant, but like, we have a connection where like we just kind of play off each other. So it wasn't like we had to force it. It just came naturally in our interviews and things like that kind of sold it for them, obviously, because we ended up making it on the show.
Yeah, and so after that, we passed a bunch of tryouts and games and all that stuff. here's another thing. Especially if it's like a prime time or a major network, they're going to do a major background check on you. Just so you know. So be prepared for that. If you're trying to get on a game show, they're going to dig into everything. So if you got some skeletons in your closet, just know they're going to find it because they have private investigators that look into all that.
You just got to be honest and just upfront with them. It was actually really funny. Well, not funny, but we were still kind of coming out of like COVID protocols. So like that was another, I don't think it was a caveat to getting on the show, but like that was also something that
it was
a part of it.
You had to get tested.
Yeah. So we went through some COVID screenings and things of that nature. And, not getting too far away with some of the things we're talking about, like right prior, like, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll go on. So, dude, we've been spending months now. Now, this wasn't, and that's the other thing too. Is like, don't get frustrated because you don't hear back right away. I mean, this was like many months, many trials, many things that me and Brian had to go through. It wasn't like they called us one day like, "Hey, you're on the show tomorrow." It was a long process to get on a major game show, and it's probably the same for a lot of other shows like Jeopardy and things like that as well. It's a very long process, and so. We finally got the clearance. Like they were like, you guys are it. Like you're coming on, you passed everything. And so, you're down to the final people and you're going to be on the show. So we're like, awesome. They gave us our plane tickets, our dates, like everything's locked in. Now they paid for everything, which was awesome. The flight and they paid for the hotel and all that stuff. So everything's locked in, right? We're like, awesome. So literally, man, I don't know. It was like, we were flying out on a Wednesday or Thursday.
I think it was a Wednesday.
We were flying on Wednesday. And Monday, I have 2 kids. Monday, my one son comes home sick. I'm like, oh, my God. And so, befade this, though, my mom and grandma, who I had very limited contact with, had COVID the week before. And I was like, okay. I told my mom, I'm not even coming near your house. Like, don't even stop by in the realm. Like, don't even come near me. I'm not coming near you. But then my son comes home. He's got COVID Monday. I'm like, I felt so bad, but I'm like, you're going to my mom and grandmom's. I'm like, you just go. Like, I was nice about it, but I'm like, okay, go. So I had like no contact with him, but he was in my house. I'm like, oh no. So then like 2 hours later, my other son was still home and he was fine. He's like, oh, I'm not feeling good, Dad. And I'm like, oh no. So then we tested him and he's got it. So I'm like, pack it up, Mom and G cheese. See you later. So he went over there because I knew that house was good. And I'm like, oh my God. And then my kid's mother had it. And not that I had contact with her, but like they got it from her.
It was
my
like
grandma. It was like all over the place.
It was honestly like, I'm like, are you?
So I called. I felt. Listen,
yes.
I felt so bad, and I'm like, I gotta call Brian. Like, I have to let him know now. And I was negative. I tested myself. I'm like, I'm negative, but I just felt like it was like this impending storm. And I called Brian. I'm like, listen, I'm just giving you a heads up because if you had COVID, you could knock on the show. That was like they very clear about that. I'm like, just giving you a heads up. This is what I'm going through. I've tried not to have any contact with anybody here, but like this was in my house. And he's like, and I felt so bad because we had spent so much time and effort and like getting off from work and like everything. So lo and behold, it's like Wednesday. I test again before we go to the flight, and I'm like, I'm still negative. So like there, and then I guess it was Thursday morning they give you a test.
Yeah.
The day of the show, and I'm like sweating. I'm still feeling fine. I have no.
Yeah, there was no symptoms at all.
And I'm like, but I'm just like anxiety, like, oh my God.
I know that was
because they got you with all the other contestants outside.
Yes, that you're gonna film with that day and stuff.
And it was like awkward, and I was like, and luckily I passed, and I was like, oh my
that
God.
was like hurdle number 1. But so getting back to like preparation. So again, we kind of already mentioned Anthony and I. We've been friends for a long time. We're super competitive. Just in general, and we study so they contacted us and like pretty much said like, hey, start playing the game on the app, and they had an app game, and it was like super cool, and literally like from Jump Street, I was on this app, like, I mean, you name it, any few minutes that I had, I was playing on the app, and then I was on him like, dude, you playing on the app today? Like, hitting them up every couple of days, like, you played on the app today, right? Like, have you been playing on the app?
I'm gonna segment this.